David's eyes were full of anger as he pulled me toward the chair and forced me to sit down. Before I could react, he grabbed thick ropes and tied my wrists and ankles, restraining me in place. "This is your fault," he yelled, his voice trembling with fury. Without hesitation, he threw a bucket of salty water over me, causing a burning sting on my skin. My heart raced as I struggled to free myself, knowing I had to escape before it was too late. "Hello, my name is Isabella Grant, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought I'd be telling this kind of story, but life has a way of taking unexpected turns. I live in Austin, Texas, with my 6-year-old son, Ethan. I once believed my husband David and I had the perfect life, but everything fell apart in ways I never imagined. David and I met like many couples do, when everything still felt magical. He was charming, hardworking, and full of life. We got married after a year of dating, and soon after, Ethan was born. For a time, things were good. David worked as a contractor, and I taught at a local school. We had stability, and I thought we were building a future together. But as the years passed, David changed. He became more distant, more critical. Little comments turned into stinging remarks. "Why isn't the house clean? What do you even do all day?" At first, I thought he was just dressed from work. But the small criticisms grew into something much worse. Then came the day that changed everything. I discovered David had secretly invested all of our savings, nearly $40,000, into a high-risk, illegal cryptocurrency scheme. I had no idea he was doing this behind my back. When the investment failed, he didn't apologize. Instead, he demanded more money, insisting we needed to sell our belongings to cover his losses. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That money was meant for Ethan's future, for his education, and our security. When I refused to sell anything to fix his mistake, that's when David snapped. His anger became something uncontrollable, and I began to fear for our safety. David's outbursts became more unpredictable. I found myself walking on eggshells, afraid of what might trigger him. One night, after calming Ethan down from a nightmare, David barged into the room, his eyes wild with fury. "You need to help me fix this," he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. "I can't lose everything." "David, I've told you I won't sell our things." "That money is for Ethan's future," I said, trying to remain calm. That's when he lunged at me, grabbing my arm and dragging me toward the kitchen. He shoved me into a chair and tied me down with ropes from the garage. I struggled, but his grip was too strong. "You'll regret this," he snarled, inches from my face. He grabbed a bucket of salty water and threw it over me, the sting searing my skin. I was soaked, cold, and terrified, but I couldn't let him see my fear. As soon as he stormed out of the room, I began working on the ropes, twisting and pulling until I could free myself. My mind raced. Ethan was in the house, and I had to protect him. I couldn't let this go on any longer. The next morning, I called Rachel Connor, a family lawyer who had helped women in situations like mine. I explained everything, and she listened intently. "Isabella," she said, "you need to act quickly. David's involvement in illegal activities and the abuse give us a strong case. We'll file for divorce and full custody of Ethan. With the evidence we have, we may be able to press criminal charges as well." Rachel's words gave me hope, but I knew David wouldn't make it easy. I hired a private investigator to dig into David's cryptocurrency dealings. It didn't take long to find the evidence we needed. David hadn't just lost our savings, he had been defrauding others, using their money to fund his addiction to risk. It was worse than I had imagined. David wasn't just reckless, he was dangerous. As Rachel built our case, I stayed with my parents, knowing Ethan and I would be safe there. But when David found out, he didn't take it well. One night, he showed up at my parents' house, banging on the door and screaming my name. "Isabella, open the door, you can't do this to me." My father called the police, and David was arrested for violating a restraining order. It was the first time I saw him completely out of control. There was no turning back now. Rachel filed for divorce and full custody of Ethan, while the investigator kept digging into David's finances. The evidence we gathered was overwhelming. David wasn't just a gambler, he was a criminal. When the time came to serve David with divorce papers, I was terrified. I knew this would set him off, but I had no choice. I couldn't keep living in fear. David's reaction to the divorce papers was exactly what I had feared. He showed up at my parents' house in the middle of the night, pounding on the door, shouting, "Isabella, open this door right now. You can't do this to me." His voice was filled with desperation and rage. My father stood firm, calling the police again, and David was taken away in handcuffs. Watching him being dragged off was both terrifying and a relief. It confirmed that I had made the right decision, but it also reminded me of the danger that still lingered. Rachel moved quickly to get a restraining order, and we began filing the necessary documents for full custody of Ethan. The private investigator continued digging deeper into David's illegal investments, uncovering shady deals and hidden accounts. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that David wasn't just irresponsible, he had committed serious crimes. The legal battle ahead was daunting, but I had no choice. Rachel reassured me that we had a solid case. With the evidence we had gathered, she was confident that David would not only face charges for his illegal activities, but also for the abuse I had endured. We were prepared for the trial, but nothing could have prepared me for the emotional toll it would take. The day of the trial arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with my heart pounding in my chest. I sat next to Rachel, who was a rock through the whole ordeal, and tried to steady my nerves. Across the room, I saw David sitting with his lawyer, looking calm and composed, as if none of this was his fault. But I knew the truth, and so did Rachel. Rachel began by laying out the case against David. She presented the evidence of his illegal investments, showing the court how deeply he had been involved in the cryptocurrency scheme. The investigator had uncovered documents, emails, and financial records that painted a clear picture of David's fraudulent activities. He had been playing with other people's money, using it to fund his addiction to risk and gambling. As Rachel presented the evidence, I could see the jury paying close attention. David's lawyer tried to argue that he hadn't intended to defraud anyone, that the investment had simply failed, but the evidence was too strong. It was clear that David had knowingly engaged in illegal activities, and there was no way out for him. Then, Rachel shifted the focus to the abuse. She presented photos of the bruises I had sustained, the police report I had filed, and detailed accounts of the night David tied me to the chair and threw the salty water over me. Listening to those details being laid out in front of strangers was excruciating, but I knew it was necessary. This was my chance to protect myself and Ethan. When it was my turn to testify, I felt my legs shake as I walked to the witness stand. I took a deep breath and tried to calm the fear bubbling up inside me. I looked over at Rachel, who gave me a reassuring nod, and then I began to speak. "I never thought my life would come to this," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "David and I were happy once, but things changed. He became controlling, distant, and then he started making decisions without me, putting our family at risk." I paused, trying to steady my breathing. I went on to describe the night he tied me up, the fear I felt as he threw the water over me, and how I had to escape with Ethan. As I spoke, I could feel the tension in the room. The jury was listening intently, and I hoped they could understand just how terrifying that night had been. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. I glanced at David, but he refused to look at me. His expression was cold, distant, as if he was still in denial about everything he had done. The trial continued, and it became clear that David's defense was crumbling. His lawyer tried to shift the blame, saying that David had been under pressure, that he had never intended to hurt anyone. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and there was no way to excuse his actions. Finally, the day came for the verdict. I sat in the courtroom, my heart racing, as the jury returned with their decision. The judge asked them to read the verdict, and the room fell silent. "Guilty," the foreman announced. David had been found guilty on multiple counts: fraud, illegal gambling, and domestic abuse. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but there was still one more step: the sentencing. A few weeks later, I sat in the courtroom again, waiting for the judge to hand down David's sentence. My heart pounded as the judge read the charges and announced the punishment. David was sentenced to 10 years in prison for his crimes. He would serve time for the fraudulent investments and for the abuse he had inflicted on me. On top of that, he was ordered to pay restitution for the money he had stolen from the investors in the cryptocurrency scheme. I was granted full custody of Ethan, and David was barred from having any contact with him. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge's ruling, I felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was finally over. David would no longer be a part of our lives, and Ethan and I could finally start to rebuild. The days after the trial were filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. I knew that I had won the legal battle, but the emotional scars were still there. Moving forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I had the support of my parents, and I had Rachel, who had been more than just a lawyer. She had been a friend. Ethan and I moved into a new home, a small but cozy apartment not far from my parents' house. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and it was safe. I decorated Ethan's room with his favorite colors, and we hung up pictures of happy memories to remind us of the good in life. Slowly but surely, we began to heal. Ethan smiled more, played more, and even made new friends at school. Watching him flourish gave me the strength to move forward. I went back to teaching, and I found comfort in the routine of work, knowing that I was building a better future for my son. In the months that followed, I received news that David had tried to appeal his sentence, but it was denied. The justice system had upheld the original verdict, and David would serve his full time in prison. That news brought a sense of finality, and I knew that chapter of my life was closed. I joined a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. Sitting in a room with women who had gone through similar experiences helped me process everything that had happened. We shared our stories, our struggles, and our hope for the future. Through this group, I began to rebuild my confidence, realizing that I was stronger than I had ever known. One day, months after the trial, I received a letter from the district attorney's office confirming that David's appeal had been rejected for good. The relief that swept over me was indescribable. I had fought for my son, for myself, and now we could truly begin to live without fear. Looking back, I realized how far Ethan and I had come. The pain, the fear, the struggle, they were all part of our story, but they no longer defined us. We had moved forward. I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor, and that was something no one could ever take away from me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more engaging content. Your support helps us bring more stories to life. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos.